welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there on your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going. Well, hi, hello, and welcome. I hope you are all ready and excited. Today's topic, don't be the next headline, securing your organization from ransomware criminals. Because this is our major fear, right? We don't want to be that next major story. And I was thinking about this as I was prepping for the EcoCast, and I was remembering when I was in college in the Midwest, I played ultimate frisbee. And if I'm being honest, I was not the best defender. I wasn't great at defense. So I just had this mantra that I developed. And basically I decided it wasn't going to be my girl who scored. That was the only thing I was focused on. So I literally remember saying out loud in the end zone as I'm chasing behind this girl, not my girl, not my girl. She's not going to score. She's not going to score. And I think that's how a lot of us feel. We're chasing behind our opponent. We're behind the disc and we're just saying, not us, not us, not us. And here's the thing. The reason that I wasn't a good defender, what made me bad at defense, was that I was too focused on my girl. I was too focused on where the disc was instead of looking at the throwing, looking at the space on the field, predicting where the disc would be next. So basically, I was completely attached to where I was and not looking for the risk factors and addressing them. And that's what we're going to do today. So with the help of some awesome experts from Masuni, from Palo Alto Networks, and ReliaQuest, we are going to look at the space. We're going to look at the risk factors at a higher level so that you are not caught on your heels and always feeling a step behind your opponent. This is going to be such a great conversation. I cannot wait to get started. So let's dive right in and get things going here. All right, well, I'll start by saying hi. And again, my name is Jess Steinbach. I am a moderator here at Actual Tech Media. Now, my fellow moderators, Keith Ward will be here with us on live chat, and Scott Becker is joining us in just a moment for a keynote chat. But before we jump into that, I do want to make sure we review the prizes because that's always a fun way to kick off our day here. So today on the EcoCast, you could win a $300 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away every 30 minutes. So we have 3 of those with us today. So stay tuned for that. If you're not sure whether you meet the full terms and conditions, I mentioned this in the housekeeping, they are saved for you in that handouts tab. So you can head on over to the handouts tab and check those out if you'd like a little more info. And with that, let's get things rolling here because I have a very special treat. We are going to start our day chatting with the one and only Scott Becker, who is not only one of the wonderful moderators here at ATM, he also has years of experience as a journalist, editor-in-chief, all kinds of cool things. So Scott, since our theme today is don't be the next headline, securing your organization from ransomware criminals, I thought that this would be a great opportunity to bring you on. And I would like you to wear your technology journalism hat today, Scott. I'm assuming you have that very stylish hat on you right now. And we're going to talk about the headlines. I'm just going to assume, Scott, that there has been, shot in the dark, maybe some ransomware news recently, I would guess.
Yeah. And, I've got one of those hats on right now, one of those, what are they, fedoras with the band and the little press.
Yes, the little press ticket. Yeah.
If you can't see me, that's definitely what I'm wearing.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, Jess, thanks for having me on. Really interesting intel there about your ultimate Frisbee days. I assume, though, you were great on offense, right?
Yeah, well, let's go with that assumption. Yes, Scott, I will leave you with that.
Yeah, well, so as you mentioned, the one guarantee when it comes to doing a ransomware event is that there's always plenty of interesting, bad news stuff to talk about. And this week, of course, is no exception.
Oh, great. Okay, so starting out with some bad news, what do you got?
All right. Well, I've got 4 of the types of headlines that everybody here wants to avoid being part of, and then one interesting report to talk about. So does that sound good?
Yeah, I'm into it. You're gonna scare us, and then you're gonna give us something interesting to walk away with. That sounds great.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do
All
it.
right. So First up, we've got the Register reporting that it looks like the lovable charity Save the Children was hit by ransomware with 7 terabytes of data stolen. And you've got to love the Register for decks like this one. Would be a new low even for these low lifes. But the reason it's a question is Save the Children hasn't confirmed and the source is the cybercrime group B and Lian bragging about the attack. B and Lian has been active since June of 2022, and they point up an interesting trend in ransomware actors. They started out stealing data and encrypting systems, but now they've shifted to pure extortion. So they're not bothering with the encryption, and so we're seeing that, across the sort of criminal landscape. And one other note on that one is one of their favorite attack vectors is remote desktop protocol. So that's another area to be sure to lock down. There have been some, federal government warnings about that as well. So next up, and you can see the date on this one is also September 11th. So, as I said, it's like, anytime we've got one of these, you can literally rip from the headlines of the last few days and find all kinds of bad news. But this next one is a report that came on casino.org that a cyber incident at MGM Resorts International is being closely watched by the industry due to new SEC guidelines. So the SEC chair said in July that public companies should be making disclosures about cybersecurity incidents. So if MGM was hit by ransomware and ends up making a payment, it's going to be interesting to see if that becomes public information. It could be a whole new source of information about, real world information about what people are paying and, whether they're paying and how much they're paying. So this is one to watch for sort of those post-incident implications. Now, we're also seeing some legal fallout from the massive 2021 Conti ransomware attack on Scripps Health. So you may recall this attack. It involved more than 900 victims worldwide, including hospitals, healthcare providers, and their patients. So the U.S. Department of Justice named 9 Russian nationals in indictment last week over the attacks. But of course, as with so many of these, it's not clear that any of these, people who are indicted will ever be brought into a courtroom. So, is it positive news? Is it a futile effort? I don't know. The jury's out on that. Okay, so final headline for today. A ransomware attack wiped out 4 months of government data in Sri Lanka. So this involved a government cloud and presumably started with someone clicking on a malicious link based on other reports in August of suspicious links. So this was a standard encryption attack. And although it was restored within 12 hours of the attack, there was no backup available for the period from mid-May to late August. So all that data was lost. So Jess, that was it for my headlines.
Well, yeah, okay. So mostly bad news, I think.
Yes.
Scott, that about sums it up. But you said at the start that you were going to give us an interesting report. So maybe we can switch our tone around. What's the good news in the report?
Okay, yeah. So really interesting report this week out of the UK. It's a joint report from the National Cybersecurity Center and the National Crime Agency. And reportedly, these agencies are being criticized over their handling of individual ransomware variants. And the report is sort of a full-throated defense for focusing less on variants and more on basic blocking and tackling in ransomware defense. So it's a really interesting read because it walks you through that entire attack path of the cyber criminal system. They look at initial access vectors, exploitation, ransomware deployment, monetization, and conversion of cryptocurrency payments into cash.
Okay, this sounds super fascinating. I'm hoping that everybody out there runs out and reads the report. But just in case, what's the TLDR? What did they conclude?
Yeah, so the conclusions were really interesting. First off, they said focusing on specific ransomware strains can be confusing at best and unhelpful at worst. They point out that most ransomware incidents are not due to sophisticated attack techniques. And you can barely see the slide there. I bolded that, but I bolded the word "not." That was, bolded as well in the conclusion of the report. They also said the initial accesses to victims are gained opportunistically. And finally, they argued that success for ransomware attackers was usually the result of poor cyber hygiene. So in short, if you want to stay out of the headlines, sort of paradoxically, you don't need to focus on the headlines that much. The strains are interesting from a news perspective and what they tell you about nation state activity, But, what this report is really arguing is that it's the basic blocking and tackling of security, making sure your cyber hygiene is up to snuff, that your backups are robust, that keeps you out of the news as a victim.
See, Scott, this is taking me back. Now I wish I could go back and play Ultimate again, because I feel like I'm learning that, the strategically, it's the running around in the end zone. It's too late. You're too focused on the disc at that point, and you're not focused on the play, on the strategy of the entire way down the field. So, not focusing on the headline and instead focusing on how you play the game. I like that a lot. Look at that. It's we bringing it all together. Boy, are we good storytellers, Scott.
Absolutely.
Well, Scott, I do want to thank you so much for coming to chat with us. And the good news is our audience is about to get a lot of great advice coming at them from Nasuni, from Palo Alto, from ReliaQuest. So we're going to get into those sessions. But thank you again, Scott, for being here to kick us off today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
All right, and now I'm going to throw up a poll for all of you that we are curious about, and then we're going to roll into our sessions here. So this is a time frame question, and what we're wondering about is, what is the time frame that you have in mind at your organization for adding new or updating existing IT solutions? So in this case, of course, we're looking at ransomware preparedness, and anything related to sort of your security strategies. So as you're thinking about that, what is the timeline you have in mind? Is this more long-term, we should probably do some updates, or just kind of doing your general, making sure that you're not setting it and forgetting it with your security plans, you're just kind of staying in the loop? Or do you have an urgent need? Something is pressing right now. You need to make changes right now. You have been way too focused on the disc, and you need to be a lot more focused on the play. So let us know what your time frame is. There's no wrong answers here, and nobody's shaming anyone who's in those fast reaction categories. This is just us getting an idea for where you're at, so we can make sure that we're getting you the answers you need when you need them. So take a quick second now, fill out that poll. I see the last few answers trickling in, and we're going to move things along because it is time to get things started. And I am so excited to introduce you all to our first expert presenter today. And as you can see from the screen, we are starting out on a great note. We get to chat with the Nasuni crew. So up first, our expert speaker getting us started today is Ben Clark, Product Marketing Manager at Nasuni. Ben, thank you so much for being here with us on the EcoCast. I know you've got some great content lined up for us today. I cannot wait to get things rolling. So I'm going to hand things on over to you. Take it away, Ben.
All right. Thank you. I'm the expert here, I guess. But
That's you.
Thanks for having me today. And today kind of wanted to walk through the topic, but also give a little intro and an overview of Nasuni for those who don't know who we are. And before we jump into the bulk of it, I'll do just that. And so Nasuni is a file data platform that provides all the capabilities of your primary file shares, backup and recovery, ransomware protection, disaster recovery, and multi-site file synchronization in one solution. And we could do all that because on Nasuni, the data resides in cloud object storage. So that would be, using the three hyperscalers or other cloud providers, but it would be examples like Amazon S3, Azure Blob, or Google Cloud Object Storage. We also support on-premise object storage. And so the importance of that is, if you're familiar with object storage, it's very different than block storage, offers greater durability, a minimum of 3 copies of your data, and a lot more scalability at a much lower cost. And so with Nasuni, we use object storage for storing file data with volumes and files of any size, the metadata to describe the files, and unlimited immutable versions. And so Nasuni uses object storage for all the data, and the gold copies of that data is consolidated in the object storage in the cloud. And so we have some long-term customers that have never got rid of their snapshots that they may be taking, as frequently as every few minutes. And it sounds ridiculous, but some of our larger customers that we've had for years have around 1 billion snapshots that they could restore to or dial back to years ago and just don't really want to lose any of their versions. And that's perfectly okay. The other thing I wanted to highlight on here that kind of ties into the ransomware piece that we'll get into a little bit later are those edge instances you can see at the bottom. And number one, our ransomware detection happens in real time at the edge. But in general, these edge instances are access points to the global file system in the cloud. And so they're lightweight VMs that cache copies of your active data from the object storage in on-premise locations or cloud regions. So you don't experience the latency you would expect from using object storage in the cloud. And so when we're talking about your data protection strategy, these edge instances also serve as the front line for that strategy by sending unlimited snapshots to the cloud at very tight intervals, where they then become immutable objects and impervious to ransomware. So we'll get back to that. But to start off, kind of from where you guys left off, no one wants to be a headline here. And we've all seen tons of headlines popping up every day now. You guys had some extremely recent ones, but they're companies we all know: Dish Network, the city of San Francisco, NVIDIA, Acer, Ferrari, and Toyota. And you can see even with Toyota, I think I've actually looked into that one. The interesting point on that is it was actually an automotive component supplier that Toyota uses. They buy, I forgot the name of it, but they buy components from the supplier. And because that smaller company got hit by this ransomware attack, it affected the whole supply chain and caused Toyota to also shut down production. So it happens. It's happening more and more often. And so how can we avoid this? Attacks will hit and hit you again. So 90% of attacks are caused by human error. Clicking on a bad link, things like that really brings in the importance of implementing zero trust in your work culture and organization. But so they will hit you. So today we're kind of focusing on the mitigation and the recovery and being able to handle an attack if it happens to you. So 79% of organizations were attacked in the last 12 months, extremely high. But then 61% of these organizations that paid the ransom were hit again. So if you will rely on paying a ransom, why not just get hit again? Or why not go after you again? The impact is much larger than the ransom. The ransom can vary based on industry, size of the company. It sounds, really bad that it's a ransom of 500,000 or whatever, but that's really not the bad part when it comes to these attacks. The impact is much larger. Specifically, probably the biggest impact would be downtime, and especially if it's a healthcare network or manufacturing like Toyota. If you have to shut down production lines, the money or the hit on your organization is going to go up exponentially by the hour. As well as reputational damage, which I found a cool study on the next slide, and financial damage. A couple other key points. If you pay the ransom, 75% or less of the data is recovered. So you're not even going to get your data back, like we just saw with Sri Lanka. And 54% of organizations hit were down for at least 6 hours. And we talked about that costly downtime, but 6 hours is still not that bad compared to some organizations that are unprepared. This can take days or potentially months to really get back to business. So prevention is essential, but recovery is critical. And so storage technologies that can mitigate the impact of an attack and accelerate recovery should be a consideration for any organization. So being able to, stop the blast radius of an attack that's happening, realize it's there and stop it, as well as accelerate the recovery and get back to business as fast as possible, are key when it comes to a ransomware strategy. And so, as I mentioned, I was, recently putting together some slides on what is the the hit these organizations take from a ransomware attack besides the ransom itself, and came across a interesting study, a little outdated, but I think the principle still stands, about the reputational damage from a ransomware attack. And so, those organizations you see in the news, on average, there's a 5% hit to stockholder value after a cyber attack. And so this is over the next 240 trading days. It's an average of a 5% hit. But within that 5% average, there are winners and losers. And you can see, winners over that time actually increase their stockholder value 10 to 20% by instilling confidence in their shareholders, and losers take a loss of 10 to 20%. And why is that? The winners handled it well. They had a robust and tested incident plan. They responded rapidly. They were coherent and transparent with the facts. They knew what happened. They knew how to fix it. They knew how to stop that moving forward. And they quickly got back to business. And the losers lost confidence in their shareholders. They didn't have a plan in place. Their business was affected. They couldn't get back to business quickly. So their customers were affected. Projects were affected, pushed back, delayed. And they were not responsive, not transparent, and not coherent. So what we've learned here is attacks happen, but having a plan in place and being able to handle it well even helps you when you may become, another headline, or you may end up in the news. So really got to have that plan in place. And so a lot of this that I've been talking about comes back to getting back to business faster. I've already been repetitive saying that a few times now with these winners and losers, but also with the recovery in the last slide. And why is that? Time is money when it comes to an attack. You can see as time elapses, more files and users are affected. The downtime, that costly downtime I hit on earlier, is going to continue to increase as the blast radius of that attack increases, from minutes to hours to days. And once you kind of lose hold of a ransomware attack, that's when the real bad things happen. Your supply chain is affected. You have locations down, production lines frozen. You're losing confidential files and confidential board of director meeting recordings, which I think happened to Continental Tires is the one I'm thinking of there, and thousands of devices offline from your users. So all of this comes together to just more and more of a costly attack. And so bringing it back to Nasuni, we have a lot of customers that have over a petabyte of data on Nasuni, and security is obviously a concern for our customers that are holding a lot of data on our platform. And so we created a ransomware solution that was really focused on having an industry-leading MTTR, or mean time to recovery. And so, why is it that important that Nasuni has a good ransomware solution? Well, we're experts on your files, and 80% of a company's data is in file shares. And the most common IT systems impacted by successful attacks are storage systems and cloud-based data. And so this is extremely important for our customers. And although I'm sure all organizations on here have a security stack, we've heard the term defense in depth. We add a great extra layer of protection for our customers' file shares. And on the right-hand side, that is it's a great layer to have, somewhat narrow focus on just the files on Nasuni, but some of the improvements we've made over the last year and the main improvements we're looking towards in the future are integrations with SecOps tools like Varonis, Microsoft Sentinel. Those are the current newest ones to use Nasuni's ransomware detection and information as a tool to feed information into these larger tools, but also to coordinate across the entire organization. So if a user or a device is compromised and we identify that through Nasuni, we're not just shutting them off from the Nasuni platform, but we can now activate different things across the larger organization by integrating with these tools. Overall, the cost of preventing attack is much lower than the combined cost of paying the ransom. We talked about that. And our solution, just as scalable as our platform with object storage, is easy to implement across hundreds of locations and petabytes of data. And we can recover millions of files in seconds to minimize data and productivity loss across your organization. And so jumping into that, this has always been a selling point for the Nasuni platform, the ability to restore 1 million files in about a minute. And it's always been a part of Nasuni based on the architecture of the platform. We talked about those snapshots. They're unlimited, incorruptible, and can be retained as long as needed, and can be taken every few minutes. So if you were affected by a disaster or ransomware or anything like that and need to restore data, you already have multiple snapshots of intervals a few minutes apart. And why it's so fast is because you're simply just dialing back to the very point in time before the attack occurred. So you're not really having to move or actually restore that data from backups. And so we have a lot of situations that users won't even know this ever happened, and they'll never know that attack happened at all. And so this is great. The ability to restore this quickly is great for these attacks. But if you don't really know that you were attacked or where you were attacked or when you were attacked to know where to restore to, it isn't that helpful. And so this is, like I said, has always been kind of a built-in great point with the Nasuni platform, but we knew that that's not enough for ransomware. And so the solution that we built over the past couple of years is really formed around, getting back to business faster, but really getting to this fast recovery process as quickly as possible. And so how do we do that is focusing on the NIST framework of protect, detect, respond, recover. The protect and the recover part, is built into the platform, the unlimited immutable files and the fast recovery. But with the ransomware protection service, we're now detecting attacks live at the edge and then sending alert to the main stakeholders and identifying the source of the threat. But then the solution instantly responds by mitigating that attack and cutting that client off from the rest of the network. And that would happen in minutes or seconds after the attack is detected, instantly creating a report of all the key details. I think we quickly touched on the keynote about how MGM needs to respond to this attack and report it. And so that's a really important point for our customers, I think, especially in certain states that require that reporting within 72 hours. And so as soon as this incident is created, a PDF is also created of all the details of that attack, the files affected, the client affected, the ransomware signature, as well as a timeline of the whole attack, which most importantly at the front of the time or at the beginning of the timeline is already the last clean snapshot that was taken before the attack entered the system. And so you're instantly knowing when you need to recover to. And then finally, the newest feature we have is called targeted restore. And so that when you go to the fast recovery process, all of those key details from the report are automatically populated into the recovery process. So the system knows the exact files that need to be restored, as well as the exact snapshot to go back to. And it's with laser precision. So you don't even have to restore the entire folder if there's just a few files in there that were affected. It's going down to the granularity of certain files. And so finally, putting this all together, really focusing on the mean time to recovery with fast detection at the edge, automatically stopping the attack, and that fast recovery. This is what we've been building towards to just, when attacks happen, get our customers back to business faster. And within the last year, it's been recognized by with some awards and by our customers as doing a great job at that. Especially, we just wanted to put this up to highlight that the judge at the Cloud Awards realized that the time needing to recover from a ransomware attack is drastically reduced. And that's the importance here when you're looking for a solution to get you back to business. So, looking at those hits to reputation and the components of our ransomware solution, if you don't want to be a headline, you have to have a plan in place. You have to be able to get back to business faster to really mitigate the impact that these attacks can cause. And you have to be able to detect them as soon as possible. And so, what am I at here? Okay. Coming up to the end of a quick demo to kind of show this in action to make a little bit more sense than me walking through some slides. And then I think we're good to go for questions. That's a placeholder slide. All right, here's the demo.
When a ransomware attack happens, Nisuni knows that every second matters. That's why we are introducing Nisuni's Ransomware Prevention Add-on Service. Nisuni's file data platform automatically protects your enterprise file data with continuous file versioning, so file changes are kept safe and secure forever. And the platform's rapid ransomware recovery can recover millions of files across any number of locations in just seconds. Our new Ransomware Prevention Add-on Service dramatically shortens the overall timeline of the attack by adding detection and response capabilities. The service starts by detecting live ransomware attacks as they happen in line at the edge, and then automatically responds with mitigation policies to stop the attack and help you recover fast. And with Nisuni's targeted restore process, administrative work is minimized with a streamlined, precise recovery process that just takes a few clicks. Let's see it in action. Activating ransomware detection is as easy as flipping a switch. To avoid false positives, I can adjust the incident creation threshold to only send an alert when the threshold is passed. In this case, 50 violations within 5 minutes. The next step is enabling ransomware mitigation. The ransomware mitigation policies are designed to block a client that's involved in an attack. This reduces the impact the attacker can have on the file system and limits the number of files that can be encrypted as part of the attack. The mitigation policy also lets you set a threshold for the number of violations that will be tolerated before shutting down the client source of the attack. I'll click the Save button, and the management console will set this policy on all of the edge appliances connected to this volume. Now let's see how it works in an attack. Here we see 2 simulated ransomware attacks running simultaneously. On the left, there is no protection add-on service. On the right, we've enabled the service. What we see on the right is that the attack gets stopped at 97 files, and the attack is no longer able to proceed with its encryption. This means that the script can't damage the files any further. Compare this to the script running on the left, where there is no ransomware protection service. In just a matter of seconds, the attack has locked down hundreds of files and keeps going. An unmitigated attack can potentially impact tens of thousands or even millions of files in a very short period of time. Now let's take a look at Nisuni's Incident Management section, where we have a view of all of the incidents that have been detected by the system. A shield icon indicates that the system has proactively responded to the attack using the mitigation policies, and that the client was blocked. Now we know the attack has been stopped and controlled, and we now can access the incident report to fully understand the scope of the attack. Nisuni's ransomware attack incident report starts with a summary of key details about the incident, including the edge clients involved, the volume involved, and the number of files that were encrypted. It also provides an event timeline. The timeline illustrates key events related to the incident, including the last completed snapshot that was taken prior to the beginning of the incident. Now that we have all the details of the attack, we can now move back to the NMC and initiate Nisuni's targeted restore process. This opens up a dialog for a restore job that is automatically configured for that incident with the exact files that were affected by the attack and the last clean snapshot. All the admin has to do is input the ransomware pattern to ensure the original files and names are recovered correctly. Configure a few final settings and confirm the restore. When a ransomware attack happens, time becomes money, and every second you save reduces the economic impact on your organization. Nisuni's ransomware protection is designed with this in mind. We help your team respond quickly and ensure end users are back to accessing their files normally as quickly as possible. To learn how Nisuni's ransomware protection services can help your organization thrive in the face of today's ransomware threats, visit nisuni.com and contact us today.
All right, so that's that demo. That's it for my part. Scott, I think I'm probably coming up on time. I can answer the questions in the text if that works better, but
Yeah. We may have to do a little bit of that live chat for question and answers. I do want to point out before we let you go, though, Ben, that we've got a poll up on the screen here for our audience. So for everyone out there, if you're looking for a little bit of additional information from Nisuni, because there's obviously lots more to cover, we're just scratching the surface. So click on that poll right now. Let Nisuni know how they can follow up with you, what additional information that you would like. Think of this as the easy button for moving things forward. I do want to ask you, Ben, before you leave us, and I appreciate you being able to stick around on live chat because there's a lot of questions in here, and I know we want to get some answers to the folks out there. So stay tuned for answers coming. But Ben, if somebody wants to get started with Nisuni and jump right in, what do you recommend as that first step?
I think definitely just reach out and talk to someone to learn a little bit more about the file data platform. I kind of focus on the ransomware part, but I think I did leave that demo if you want to dig in a little further, and please feel free to reach out with any questions or connections from my side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, of course. Go to the website. Yes. And that's a fantastic point, Ben. And I'll remind or second that if you go to the handouts tab, you can find that link to the Nisuni demo that we just watched at the end of the presentation there. So spend a little time exploring that later, rewatch it, because there's lots of great info in there. Ben, I want to thank you so much for being here to chat with us today and for sticking around on live chat. And it's been a really great conversation with you.
All right. Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right. And thank you to everyone out there who is clicking on the poll. Keep that going. Keep exploring that handouts tab. And I am also going to very quickly give away another prize. Our very first lucky winner of a $300 Amazon gift card today is Brian Dominic of Illinois. Brian Dominic of Illinois. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap up the EcoCast today. Now, don't forget, there's still 2 more chances to win that Amazon gift card. Plus, we have that best question gift card coming at you from each session. So keep those questions coming in. The competition is fierce today. You guys all had your coffee. You're awake. You're here. You're alive. I love it. And you're curious, best of all. So lots of good questions coming in. Well, keep that coming because we've got another session in the wings. So let's move along here. Up next, as you can see, we have another rock star presenter here with us. This time we get to chat with the Palo Alto Networks crew. I'm so excited to introduce you all to Sama Manchada, consultant Palo Alto Networks at Unit 42. Sama, thank you so much for being here with us today at the EcoCast. I know you have a lot to cover, some really cool stuff lined up for us. We want to leave some time for questions. So I'm going to step back. I'll hand things over to you. Take it away, Sama.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and excited to talk to all of you all about ransomware and extortion. So this is where I'm kind of be looking at both of these things from an incident response lens and covering some popular trends and things that we've been seeing through our work, working with different clients all over, trying to help them sort of respond to their worst day when they sort of deal with these ransomware and extortion threats. So who am I? My name is Sama, and I'm a consultant with Unit 42. I work with both our incident response team and our offensive security / proactive team. So I am kind of fortunate. I get to respond to incidents and help companies and clients as they deal with their worst day, dealing with things like ransomware and extortion, like I mentioned. But I'm also really fortunate that I get to work with our offensive security team and help prepare our clients for things like ransomware by, performing things like penetration tests, vulnerability assessments, all that good stuff, so that people can kind of understand their weaknesses and work to secure those before they face these types of situations. But yes, over a little bit of an overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll kind of be looking at everything sort of from the broad overview of the current threat landscape and some of the, again, these trends and insights that we've been seeing, and also going all the way to some recommendations that we have, again, coming from all the cases and the clients that we've worked with, that we have for preparing yourselves and your organizations going forward. So we'll start with a broad overview of the current threat landscape. And so our threat researchers have calculated that on the dark web, that there is one publicly posted new extortion threat every 4 hours, which is, that's crazy. Extortion is on the rise. Anyone that tells you that ransomware extortion is, not super popular, obviously it's in the news everywhere, but it is a lot more common also than you think. And we see a lot of these names and, these proofs of compromise for all these different victims. And this number is increasing year on year. This is in 2022 from our data. We've noticed that it's about 4% higher than what it was in 2021. But, we still think this is going to keep on going up. And these, criminal gangs, they have a global presence, and we see them pretty much all over the world in 107 different countries. And their main target, overall seems to be mostly the US. Again, kind of varies. And a lot of other countries are also, getting attacked, but this is, it's a huge threat, and it's a huge problem that we see pretty much day in and day out. So, and some of the we'll cover some of the insights that we see from dark web leak sites and kind of what that tells us. So we see a lot of, new victims getting posted daily to these dark web leak sites. However, these numbers are kind of not necessarily accurate, in the sense that this information is usually the only information that gets reported are the ones that, these organizations who aren't paying the original demand money. A lot of these organizations pay to keep their information off the dark web, so the actual global impact of these, criminal gangs who maintain these leak sites is actually higher than what we can observe and what we can actually calculate. So keep in mind that the information on this slide, these, almost 3,000 victims, and, a lot of these organizations from, big name organizations from the global 2K list, things like that, they are all being affected by these, large groups, and a lot of known groups that you see, Lockbit, Conti, Black Hat, Hive, Black Basta. But that number is definitely higher than what we see. And so no one is really safe from this. It is, again, continuing to be a bigger and bigger problem each year. And so that kind of ties back to the question of what really are these threat actors looking for, and what exactly are they targeting, and kind of how can you prepare for that? So one of the, things that threat actors really look out for is industries with vulnerabilities and the capability for a large payout. So a lot of the common vulnerabilities that we see are things like software out of date, where, again, that's a really easy one. Threat actors can take advantage of systems running old software that isn't patched or isn't updated. And especially, with new different types of vulnerabilities and new exploits coming out all the time, that is really important, is keeping up to, and understanding what software you have, and also making sure that it is patched and as up to date as it can be. And then another one is looking at business operations depending on a timeline. Attack groups love to, they're here to make money, and they're here to take advantage of you in however way they possibly can. So they'll take advantage of a pressure situation any, kind of deadline or like product deliverables that, they know is coming up, that's a really great time for them to strike. And they know that they're more likely to get the payout because of, again, it's a high touch situation or something like that. And then another huge component is looking at attack surface exposures. So actually 75% of the ransomware attacks and breaches that we sort of dealt with as a team result from these attack surface exposures. A lot of companies really aren't aware of all of the different systems and things that they have in their environment, whether it's, old machines that they thought that they had taken off, or, old servers, they thought this was only internal facing, but actually there is something running on it that does make it external facing. All of those little details, they add up. And the more, companies aren't, aware of exactly everything that they have, the wider sort of like their attack surface becomes. And all it takes is, that's the problem, is the threat actor really only needs to find one way in. They don't need to find every way in. And the wider the attack surfaces, the more troublesome it can be to sort of defend from those attacks. And then you can also kind of see by industry, there's, obviously certain industries are more heavily impacted than others. And that kind of ties back to what I was saying earlier, where the threat actors will focus on the industries where they know that, they have more of a, they can get more leverage or have the capability for the larger payout. With things like manufacturing, disrupting a plant, disrupting production, that has an insane, impact on a company. And, that effectively like renders them useless until they're able to sort of, come back online and stuff like that. So those might be more, likely to pay them than others. And then, things like professional legal services, they're again, more likely, especially with, client data, any, type of personal or like, protected data of any kind. Those types of things really, again, high value, if that makes sense. So those are the things that, they're targeting. They're trying to make money, and they're going to go after the things that they can, get more value for them with less work, I guess. And then kind of that ties into the next topic of what really do they want? And most of the extortion groups really are after payment. However, some of them, again, are after more high value information. And so sometimes the encryption, the extortion, all that is more of a distraction technique, while they go after something else that they want. However, that kind of, again, it just depends situation by situation and depends on the threat actor group as well. And we can see that based on, what kind of groups target specific organizations over others, and whereas some of them will just, kind of go after more of like the payout route. So in some cases we'll see like, again, more of a distraction technique, and they'll kind of do something more damaging and, use the ransomware to sort of direct attention towards, encrypted systems and things like that, while they still have access to the environment and can still poke around and find other things and find high value information, especially. Obviously, one of the main ones is money, and getting paid is obviously something that they're interested in. So the more that they find information that's valuable to third parties, or that, people will pay for, they are interested in pursuing that type of information a lot of the time, and also extracting more of a pay out of a company who's, doesn't want that information to be released, or doesn't want, obviously, their clients' data to be at risk. So they're more likely to pay to avoid for that to happen. And then intellectual property, definitely we've seen this in multiple cases where ransomware is just a way of, again, it's a distraction tactic where they're able to they're able to steal intellectual property or conduct some type of cyber espionage. And, it's just, ransomware is one of the tools, or like ransomware and extortion is just one of the tools that they use to then further along and, get more of the high information or like high value information that they're after. And ultimately cause more disruption. And, there's obviously a bunch of different ways that they go about this. These also keep changing. So this is kind of, again, more along the lines of like some of the trends that we have been seeing. Encryption being the most common. I think probably across the board, this is the most common one where attackers come in and they find whatever data they need, and then they encrypt all the remaining files on the system and leave a note behind and say, hey, like, if you want your files back, or if you want us to cooperate with you, you got to pay us this money. This is how to find us. So it is, and like we said before, this is definitely the most common thing that we see. I think probably in 90% of the cases that we see some form of encryption. And we do find it as like, now that this is being used in addition to a lot of other tactics as well. It's not just the only thing that they're doing anymore. Attackers are obviously advancing, and they're kind of adding more to what they bring, more the chaos that they bring with them, which is interesting. Another one that is like popular that people have heard of is the distributed denial of service attacks, or DDoS attacks. I wouldn't say that this one is really growing, and it's not always the most effective, really, but this one is, when it does happen, I feel like a lot of people always hear about it, like, oh my gosh, like there's a possibility that, the client, like that a threat actor can, take down a company or take down a whole, like, organization if they're, trying to target them. That said, this is most often, I think, used as an attention grab and trying to get, additional sort of pressure put on a sort of organization. But we really don't see this very commonly. We see this probably in about 2% of our cases in total, which is also interesting. The next one is harassment. So this one we are seeing is growing actually over time. Threat actors have, discovered that obviously organizations, companies, they don't want the public to know about different breaches that are happening, or if they've been compromised. So threat actors have resorted to, adding harassment as a layer to sort of up the ante and put that pressure on companies and organizations to sort of, again, make the payment so that they are forced to then like basically that people don't know that this is what's happened, and that they don't know that they've been breached, or that there's been some kind of leak of data, whatever. Again, it has that potential to heighten the risk of these large scale like public relations and personnel situations. With harassment also, we also see them a lot of times doing a lot of reconnaissance and finding employee and other like just employee information and things like that, calling employees, and not just at the higher levels of like, the CEO or whatever. We see them targeting regular employees too, scaring them and things like that. And again, forcing pressure from all different angles to try and make companies, or trying to make, whoever is the decision maker to make that payment. And then the last one is data theft. This is, again, also very, very common. Data theft, or threatening to leak that sensitive data. A lot of times, again, this is used in combination with a lot of these different techniques and tactics, especially with encryption. By stealing data or exfiltrating data out of the environment, that's what attackers have as leverage, and they can use that to say, well, hey, like, I have all this data that, you don't want the public to see. So this is definitely the most effective in terms of inflicting damage and in, getting what they want out of an organization. And so, but yeah, this is most often combined with something else, usually one of the other three. A lot of times we see data theft and then encryption right after. And we definitely see data theft and then harassment as well. And also every once in a while that, random distributed denial of service that comes in too. So definitely they're always up to something, that's for sure. But yes, and then kind of with extortion and with ransomware, kind of understanding as attackers sort of get more advanced and as they kind of, do more damage and, keep spreading out to all these different companies and things like that. I think earlier, a lot of the opinion used to be, as long as you have a good backup, like everything is fine. But we're not necessarily seeing that that is true anymore. The extortion techniques, people will still pay even if you have all your data backed up. Just because, you know, you have the data doesn't mean that they don't have the data, if that makes sense. So backups are certainly a key piece, especially if you do get, you know, ransomed, or, you know, and, you know, if your files are locked and encrypted and all that. It's certainly a key piece of making sure that, you know, you can get your systems up and running and at least, you know, continue business operations as normal, but it is only step one. Again, attackers will still threaten to disclose sensitive information, and backups really cannot prevent that in any way. And then also, a lot of times we see that backups create this false sense of confidence. We've seen cases, unfortunately, where organizations have made the decision not to pay a ransom because they had backups and they were confident in their backups. But, you know, threat actors say, okay, fine, I'll go after your backups now. In other cases, unfortunately, we've also seen where, you know, companies just, you know, they thought, or they were confident in their backups and their backups failed, or, you know, again, got targeted, something like that. So those damages end up costing more than the ransom demand after all, when all those kind of things come into play. So attack, you know, and attack groups will, you know, utilize different methods to inflict damage, and they really don't rely on whether or not the organization has a robust backup system, but certainly, you know, it's an important piece, but again, it is not the be all and end all. It's not the one ticket, you know, this is going to protect you going forward. It's a certainly important piece, but there's a lot more to kind of also make sure that you're doing to make sure that they're helpful in the situation. But, you know, all that being said. And then next up, we'll kind of talk about a lot of these APTs, or advanced persistent threat groups, and why they choose ransomware, really. But yes, these groups are definitely financially motivated. They're almost always counting on the fact that large organizations will assign a low-level risk to ransomware attacks, and kind of overlook the possibility of ransomware. However, that said, overlooking ransomware leaves that opportunity for a really impactful attack from an advanced persistent threat group. And so one of the things that we know about them and the use of ransomware, again, most of them are financially motivated. A lot of the countries that we see involved in ransomware attacks are the ones who are under sanctions and embargoes and things like that. So that gives them the extra motivation to keep pushing and to keep going and, you know, go that further extra step and not just go for the low-hanging fruit necessarily, and really make sure that they can get financial gain, because it, you know, carries a much bigger sort of incentive for them. There's also a lot of, you know, high potential for destruction and espionage. Companies don't often realize the true purpose of a threat actors group and why they're doing certain things. So malware authors are getting more and more advanced as well, and they're able to sort of blur the lines between a typical ransomware sort of like executable file versus one that's just a system like activity wiper, and destroying evidence or destroying log data and things like that. Those are the things that we will take a look at, and usually that's how, from the incident response side, we can help companies and organizations figure out what the motivation might be. But again, getting rid of and destroying evidence makes it much, much harder to sort of understand the true motive a lot of the time. And then also, paying ransoms is also heavily scrutinized, obviously, especially as nations continue to sanction, especially places like Russia, where a lot of the well-known ransomware groups are located. This, you know, continues to get more and more scrutiny and more public attention, especially from federal governments all over the world, including the United States, as kind of we've seen with a lot of the administration's response and things like that to a lot of these threat actor groups and them trying to go after a lot of them. That being said, we've kind of covered a lot of the dark and the scary about ransomware. And again, it's a threat. It continues to exist. But there are definitely things that you can do to help prepare yourself and your organization. In terms of both, again, that backups is a big part of it, but there's a lot of things that you can go to take it one step further and really make sure that you are prepared in the event that things do go south. So the first thing I would say, the most important, is having and being prepared with some kind of incident response plan or playbook. Especially in this day and age, it's extremely crucial to just have that playbook in place. It's not so much a matter of if there's a potential for an attack or a threat type of thing. It is more a question of when. So the earlier that you are prepared with those plans and playbooks, it only will make your life a little easier down the line. So, and when you're thinking about those incident plans and playbooks, you want to think as if you're the attacker. You know your organization best. So what kind of information or what data kind of hurts you the most. So think about what needs to be protected the most, what needs to be considered in layers and levels are definitely all important here. It's hard to say, okay, protect everything, because that's, especially again, like I said earlier, with attack surfaces being wide and things like that. So consider what is the most important and make sure that you have security in layers and make sure that is built into your plan. Next, looking at and understanding again what your attack surface looks like and where are your weaknesses. So that kind of ties in a lot with the, where are your weaknesses and, and that, first of all, understanding what your attack surface even is and how wide, how broad, what are the different ways someone could get in, things like that are all really important to understand first. Because then from that, you can sort of, again, tailor your incident response plans, look at things like changes in people, technology, and again, just that kind of ties into the next thing, which is, again, running tests and simulations to validate both your detection and response capabilities, and just making sure, and also just making sure that, things run the way they're supposed to. You have, if you have, SIM tools, if you have, obviously endpoint detection or, any other security tools in your environment, make sure that, they're running the way they're supposed to, and make sure that the people who are also operating those tools are able to understand them as well. That's another huge piece of it. And that, again, then next up is, of course, making sure that you have those backups in place, that they've been tested, they work as expected, so there's no surprises on the day of. So when you try to, restore from a backup, that, oh no, actually it wasn't configured the way it was supposed to, and actually we don't have any backup data, or we have a year's gap or like a month in data gap that, that's really crucial or really important that we, had what we were supposed to have. So again, the more that you are aware of what's in your environment and more, what all you have, and you're regularly testing those things, the better off you will be. And then last, of course, is investing in training your employees to be aware of both best security practices, but also, again, making sure that everybody is trained and knows what to do in a situation. So if, again, you have a situation, God forbid, and you are under attack, what is the first thing you're going to do? Who's that first phone call you're going to make? What team is going to step in and what are they going to look at first? All those kinds of things. And that kind of ties back into the whole plan and the playbook, having all that kind of ready to go. But, test it out, have something like a tabletop exercise or go through the motions of it. Because again, in the moment, when something happens, it's always a situation of panic and, you're not quite sure what's going on. Having gone through it in a simulated environment, at least, or having, done some training, it just makes everybody more prepared, more comfortable. They know kind of what they're about to sort of walk into, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of what I have. We obviously have a lot of information and services and things like that you can kind of check out in terms of you can see what all we offer and how we can help in these situations. A lot of our threat research that has informed a lot of the information from this presentation, in addition to the work that we do, and kind of looking at the reports that have been put together from our threat intel and our consulting teams to kind of help inform a lot of what we do. But yeah.
Sama, thank you so much. What a great presentation. And I do want to, I'm kind of stalling for a second before I move over to the poll question, because I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get these links. So please do click on those links right now, get that QR code, take a screenshot, whatever you want to do, but make sure you've got those resources, because in just a second here, I'm going to move the screen over to our poll, and it's going to ask you what additional information you would like to get from Palo Alto Networks, Unit 42. What more can you would be helpful for you in your research and your journey right now? So when we click over to that poll, you guys are all going to click on that. Sama, we are unfortunately right over time here, so we're not going to be able to stop for live Q&A for very long here. But I do want to ask you, and first of all, I do want to say you've gotten a lot of high fives from the audience. I think that folks out there really enjoyed your presentation, and there are quite a few questions coming in. So if you do have some time to answer those on live chat, that's amazing. Either way, folks, we will make sure that all your questions get sent to Palo Alto Networks, so you will get answers back. Before you leave us though, Sama, if somebody out there is really excited to get started, you mentioned a few of those resources on that previous screen, what would you recommend as that first step?
I think in terms of just like, yeah, again, making sure that, you have a plan in place. If there's, and if you do have one, checking your plan in place and kind of going through the motions, testing it, understanding kind of what is the plan, what is there, and then assessing, okay, when was the last time this was updated? Is it up to date with current trends and threats and things like that? Okay, like, for example, are there like situations in there are like including things like harassment or, extortion or, all that, like make sure that, all those scenarios are documented, because you want to make sure that every stakeholder that's involved, they know the process to make decisions promptly, and they don't have to sit there. Like anytime that, especially during an incident that is kind of wasted on decision making and things like that, if there's already a plan in place and you already know what to do, things go so much faster. And from the incident response side, when we're kind of responding to those threats and trying to catch up with and figure out where the threat actor is and, how far they've gotten, all of those moments really like make up, and they really help us help you a lot faster. We can kind of, a lot of times get ahead of the threat actors. If organizations are moving quickly, they're ready to go, they've already, kicked off their incident, response playbook plan, and, they're working with us. We're a lot more help to them in the beginning, and we can kind of a lot of times stop threat actors before they can do more damage. So those plans and playbooks, I know it's a policy, it's a lot of, training, and sometimes it's not the world's most, fun thing to do, but again, all that time that you save in the moment then with those decision making and all that, those really count when it comes to defending against attacks.
Well, and 100% agree, and we hear that over and over again. And I still think it bears repeating, because it's easy to think, oh, well, we've got the plan, so we're done. And so for somebody that thinks that, Palo Alto Networks is the right way to go with this, and I think you've made a very convincing argument for that. What do they do there? Is it going to the website, booking a demo? What is kind of step one with Palo Alto?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to contact us through any one of those, methods. We can help with all kinds of things, from developing best practices, all kinds of, and we also have, we have both the incident response side of things. So if you don't have an incident response retainer already, we definitely offer that as a service as well. So that, if something does happen, you have somebody on speed dial ready to go. We also have obviously a huge proactive team as well. So we offer a lot of different services covering things like obviously offensive security is one I am especially partial to, but we have a lot of other ones too, especially things like, helping with developing those plans, playbooks, policies, frameworks, tabletop exercises to help you kind of go through those simulations, all kinds of things. So yeah, feel free to just contact us through any one of those methods and reach out, and we can help you kind of tailor whatever you need to do in your organization and help you.
Well, perfect. That's great. I think that's what everyone wants to hear. And again, lots of great questions coming in. Lots of high fives to you, Summer. I really appreciate you being here with us today. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you.
Thank you so much. It's been great to chat with you.
All right. And to everyone out there in the audience who clicked on that poll, keep those poll responses coming in. Keep those questions coming in. We're going to make sure that all of your questions asked get sent over to the Palo Alto Networks team. So you will get some responses back and either over live chat today or in follow up via email. So keep those coming. While you guys are clicking on the handouts, the handout that, here I'm talking about the handout. I haven't even talked about it yet. There's a great handout. It's an overview from Palo Alto Networks Unit 42. It's really going to break down and dig in even a little bit further to what we just talked about with Sama. So if you need to share this information with other people, if you have to pitch the idea to somebody else on your team, or you just want to get that memory jog later, make sure you've been to the handout tab and you've got that downloaded and saved for later. Okay, now it's time for a prize. This is our second $300 Amazon gift card, and this is going to go to someone who is here live and present at the EcoCast, and that someone is Noel Boutelier. I don't have a good French pronunciation, Noel. I apologize. Also, that might be Noel. Yeah, that might be Noel. Oh no. Okay. Well, if you live in Texas and your name is Noel Boutelier or some version similar to that, we will be reaching out to you. Wow. I am really struggling with that one today. I wish I could blame that on coffee. I think that's just my brain having a little fold today. All right. Well, we will be following up with you. So congratulations on your win. And also keep in mind, there's that best question gift card coming at you from each session. So keep those questions coming in as we go through our sessions today. Speaking of which, I think it's time to get to our next incredible session. Dun, 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 dun. All right, so here we are, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you all to our next speaker on the EcoCast. I know that you will all be excited to hear from this crew because up next, we get to chat with Colin Ferris, lead threat hunter at ReliaQuest. How cool is that title? I would love to have that title, lead threat hunter. That just sounds so I was going to say a swear word, bad something. It sounds tough. That's what it sounds like. Colin, thank you so much for being here with us today. Now, I know you have a great presentation lined up for us. We definitely want to leave some time for Q&A. I know we've been cramming a lot of info into these sessions today, and this one's going to be no exception. So I'm going to step back and hand things on over to you. Take it away, Colin.
Thanks for that introduction, Jess. So let's just get right into it. We got a lot of material to cover today. So a brief little agenda. We're going to sort of go over what a ransomware criminal looks like, as well as some examples in the wild, right? Lockbit, Alfie, back to the basics, and then go through some very specific technical controls and policies you can use to defend and secure your organization. And the last is going to be some just final thoughts from my side, as well as sort of a quick plug-in for my team and sort of the research we're going to do. So let's get into it, right? So ransomware criminals. I think everybody here probably knows what a ransomware criminal is, but I want to do a quick level set because nowadays it's not exclusively ransomware. So, ransomware is relatively young. Widespread usage didn't really start occurring until 2014, 2016. I say that to emphasize that the threat landscape for ransomware is really, really shifting quickly and constantly evolving. We've gone from objectives like normal single extortion, where it's encryption, to double extortion, encryption exfil, to single extortion, just exfil, to wipers and fake ransomware. The benefit for us, though, is that even though these are different objectives and the actions on objectives that the impact these organizations or these threat actors are trying to do, as a defender, it buckets into the same sort of technical controls that we can implement to secure. So with that, what's the profile? These ransomware operators are almost always opportunistic and financially motivated. There are some slight geopolitical exceptions, But for the most part, they just go after who they can. And with that, unfortunately, a victimology profile is you. Ransomware criminals, they want you. They're not going to, say no to access to an organization. If they can get it, they'll go in and they'll do what they need to do or attempt to do so. But that's what we're here to prevent from happening. So to sort of go over, the next little lockbit example, right? I'm not going to go through the whole slide because there's a lot to digest here, but feel free to look over it afterwards. What I want to really hit on is a couple things. One, ransomware as a service. You'll see this in the next example as well. But Lockbit, aka Evil Corp, operates a ransomware as a service model, which has affiliates and an infrastructure in place where they can conduct their operations. The good and the bad is that the barrier to entry is significantly lower, right? Anybody can get involved. The good is that these as a service models often have playbooks. So by and large, these operators, these affiliates, are going to be using the same techniques, the same tooling to accomplish their objectives, which as a defender is good for us. So let's look at initial access, right? We're always going to be wanting to secure left. So initial access, we're going to be looking at social engineering, always a huge one. Drive-by downloads, exploiting public-facing applications, phishing, hiring IABs, purchasing from IABs, initial access brokers. That's huge in the market right now. Also, using those stolen credentials to access valid accounts. Exposed RDP, or either intentionally or unintentionally, is a very, very common attack vector and initial access vector into these environments. So the next one we're going to look at, Alfie, Black Cat, right? So ransomware as a service model as well. Same thing applies. We have a typical consistent techniques that are being used by these operators. The thing I really want to hit on here is the tooling. That's the third bullet point. We see things like Cobalt Strike, which is commonly used regardless of what kind of e-crime out there is. Cobalt Strike is very, very commonly used as your command and control. ID Recon, so that's going to be your internal discovery. PS Exec, we all know PS Exec, but Emotet, right? Emotet is commonly delivered through phishing. It started as a normal sort of Trojan, but now it's a full-fledged malware loader. So again, that's going to be the human element, the weak part of the initial access chain for social engineering. And that's something we're going to touch on quite a bit in a little bit. But with all that being said, let's sort of break it down into a very high level sort of formula, I like to say. Technical controls plus visibility equals burden on the adversary. It's really as simple as that, right? We have to have the visibility we need to see the threat, to detect the threat, to contain the threat. But to do that, we have technical controls. All of that is intended to provide burden, that is to, inconvenience a threat actor by preventing them from, using the tooling they want to use, to not use the techniques, sub-techniques that they constantly use. So requiring them to pivot and use different things they're unfamiliar with, right? If we can inconvenience a threat or an adversary, they're going to have to take time to switch how they're going about their operation. And that to us gives us time to detect and contain. So defensive strategy. I know this is probably going to seem redundant to a lot of you, but I really, really, really want to hit, let's go back to the basics. Everyone thinks they're doing the basics well. And I guarantee you, regardless of what your organization, there's a place you can improve. I'm going to say it time and time again. We'll have a whole slide dedicated after this. Visibility, number one thing I want to hit on. You can't respond to a threat you can't see. You can't understand your gaps and limitations without understanding your coverage, right? You have to have visibility into your organization, and that can come from a variety of factors, irregardless of the tooling you're using. It's a methodology and a mindset that your teams can get into when you're triaging an alert, when your network engineer is trying to solve some issue. Having them ask themselves, what can't I see? And what do I need to have to do this job more efficiently and better? And documenting that will help you steadily improve your visibility in your organization. So moving on, obviously I have a whole slide on visibility. We'll talk more on it, but least privilege and access control. This is another one of those things, back to the basics, but isn't always done as well as it could be. So least privilege particularly, their privilege creep is very, very common, regardless of your organization. It's everywhere. So ensuring that you have the right, controls in place or the right policies in place to manage who owns an account, your IAM, your PAM, who owns the account, what's the role of the account, auditing who's checking out that account, and what permissions that account has. Does the service account really need all the permissions it has, or is it just need the permissions that it needs to do to accomplish its function? Service accounts, we'll talk on it later too, but service accounts are commonly abused, and it's because they have so much permission. The next one on this list, MFA. MFA is by and large the single biggest control with the highest impact you can input in your environment. And not just MFA for your cloud applications. There are authentication plugins like for Okta Duo that allow you to force MFA for RDP, which RDP, as we all know, is a very, very common protocol used by threat actors. And MFA is not equal, right? So we have push-based, we have pin-based. We see MFA fatigue all the time for initial access, where the user's just getting spammed with MFA requests and they finally just relent and say, oh, okay, well, I'll accept. And then they're in. So pin-based is definitely going to be better if your organization feels like it's possible to implement that into their environment. Passphrase policy. Yeah, I know it's a basic one, but I'm telling you, having a policy and enforcing a policy are two different things. Ensuring that the username and the password are not the same seems very basic, but it happens all the time. You have a vendor account used to set up an integration. It just was set up on the fly, had the same username and password, and forgotten about after the integration was set up. It's still there. If you didn't deprovision it, it's still there. And if it's publicly exposed, it can be leveraged to get access to your environment. The last two things here, sort of self-explanatory. Network segmentation. Everyone says they want to do it, but it's often not done as well as it could be. Let's put our critical assets in a VLAN. Let's isolate and provide controls between our workstations that are commonly going to be the single your beachhead into an incident. And let's have put those in its own VLAN, its own network segment, so we can contain that threat at the beginning rather than having unfettered access to the rest of the environment. Patching and updating. Everyone has a patching and updating schedule, but the thing I want to hit on here is primarily what is your plan of action for updating and patching for a 0-day vulnerability? If it's proof of concept comes out, 2 days later a patch comes out, how quickly can you get that patch implemented? We see it time and time again where a critical vulnerability is released and the patch isn't applied until 2 months down the road. And if you didn't have a control in place to prevent exploitation of that appliance or that application, odds are, if it's publicly exposed, it's going to be abused. So just have that in the back of your mind, taking away from this, do you have a plan of action for that? Can you spin up the resources necessary? So I talked about visibility. I told you how to whole slide, and here it is. And it's largely a reference sheet for you to go back and sort of audit what you have available to you. But the big categories here I want to hit on, email security, forward proxy, endpoint authentication, account auditing, and firewall IPS. These are the 5 really big ones that my team, when we're engaging with sort of a ransomware type event or any sort of engagement that requires us to be hands on keyboard, operating, looking, trying to detect and contain. These are the things we're looking for. Email security, like I said, phishing, number one initial access vector. Being able to track back to the source where it came from and determine, was it a phishing email? Was it a credential harvester? Did it drop malware on the host? Helps you understand the context and move forward from there in your investigation. Did they move laterally? Did they compromise an account and internally phish everyone else and do the same thing, right? Being able to trace back to the source allows you to contain an incident rather than just sort of guesstimating where it came from. Forward proxies, very, very, very useful for drive-by downloads, C2 connections, staged malware, even insider threats, right? So all this is going to provide a lot of visibility to your environment, and for ransomware specifically. If you have a C2 channel going over HTTPS, you can be or HTTP, you can say, I have abnormal HTTP connections hitting a server that, if I look into it, it's a Cobalt Strike server. Having a forward proxy gives you that visibility that you need. Endpoint, obviously, endpoint is endpoint. Understanding the actions taken on the host is really, really critical, but it is not the end all to be all. Having a network log and an endpoint log is going to give you a lot more context than just an endpoint log. And sometimes logging all the telemetry from endpoints isn't viable from an EPS point of view. Realistically, like that's a lot of data if you have a large environment. So the other logs in conjunction can provide and sort of, overcome that difference in visibility. Authentication and account auditing, there's always going to be privilege escalation. There's always going to be curb roasting. There's always going to be new account creations. So being able to determine like what's normal in an environment, like was this user getting added to universal security group expected? Probably worth looking into. Last one, firewall, it's IPS. It's really self-explanatory, being able to detect that traffic at the network edge, block it, prevent it, etc. So getting into some very specifics here, initial access and persistence. Phishing, I've hit on it, valid credentials. It's one of those things where we can prevent it if we have the right controls in place. Device certificates is something I see quite underutilized for VPN connections specifically, where they're utilizing valid credentials or they brute forced into a VPN portal. And there's no device authentication for the VPN client, right? It's just sort of, they just go in and they're done. So having device certificates allows you to both authenticate the user and the device. So the threat actor can't actually gain that initial access. MFA, I'm not going to hit on it too much. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the things is RDP, having MFA enabled for RDP. Conditional access though, and I'm not just talking Microsoft E5, I'm talking conditional access in like, if you have the VPN pool, do you have the controls in place to prevent that VPN pool from directly connecting to a domain controller? Probably you shouldn't like have that direct access enabled. But it's a lot of things that like isn't considered when you're looking at, how should this access be granted? Passphrase, I talked on it again. I'll talk on it again and again because we see it where you can't brute force an account with a successful complex password, right? And even if you have that in place, if you're not enforcing it, it's really not doing anybody any good. Your organization's still going to be at risk. The last couple things here, app blocker, I think it's very, very underutilized. RMM tooling is frequently used, tool by adversaries to establish persistence and move laterally, all the sort of stuff. So app blocker allows you to prevent the execution of those on the host, right? If you're allowed listing your specific applications or blacklisting the things that you don't want running on the host, it burdens the adversary that they can't use the tooling they're accustomed to using. And that gives you the time, and as well as a log showing that they tried to execute this, a terror, AnyDesk, et cetera, but it was prevented by app blocker. And that's an immediate red flag for your security team to say, why was AnyDesk running on this host, right? The same thing goes for VBS, BAT scripts, PowerShell scripts. App blocker can allow you to sort of prevent those script executions, or you can put policies in place to only allow execution by administrators. It's something that's not done enough, where it's just arbitrary execution that's just allowed on a host. So I highly encourage you to look into usage of app blocker for your environment. PowerShell is the sort of same bag, right? It's commonly used. It's used by all sorts of different, for legitimate purposes, but the adversary loves it too. But if we can go in and disable PowerShell if it's not being used, or if it's not necessary, we need to, right? Don't let that specific tool exist to be used and leveraged by a threat actor if you're not using it yourself. Even if you are using it, look into putting controls in place that only allow execution, like running as an administrator. If you can't execute, if you're executing malware on a host and it's trying to execute in the context of that, workstation user who ideally has limited privileges, it's not going to be able to run PowerShell. So having, understanding least privilege again and ensuring that's applied across not just the users, but the tooling in your environment will be very critical to sort of containing the threat as far left as you can. This last one is something that isn't done a lot. It's a miss quite frequently, where it's having ACLs for management consoles, VPN gateways, and Citrix portals. You shouldn't have an exposed, firewall management console. And if you do need it exposed, you need to have an ACL like explicitly allowing access for a particular IP. Like maybe you have a remote admin and or you have some sort of jump box that they need to come from. But having ACLs to manage that control. VPN gateways, if it's only expected to come from a particular business, like that, or a particular user in a particular geographic region, having ACLs in place to sort of manage that traffic will really, really drastically reduce your potential for being exploited on the public-facing application side of things. Lateral movement, discovery, right? So service accounts, GPOs, let's put them in place to prevent local remote interactive logon. I know, administrators sometimes need to do it. You can put in some, you can make it available to them still, even with policies in place. But threat actors love them. They love taking a service account and RDPing to another host. But that's part of also the least privilege. Like, let's have policies in place. Only particular accounts allowed to RDP, right? So it's a very easy fix, but it's something we see all the time when we're responding to engagements. And with the RDP, can we disable it? If you're not using RDP natively, it comes installed natively. Like, let's disable it outright. Burden the adversary, prevent them from using the tool they want to use to move laterally. If you can't, one of the biggest recommendations I have is session timeouts. So Microsoft doesn't really do a good job of explaining what the session timeout is, or if it has a timeout at all. You can go in and set that session timeout yourself. So the thing we've seen quite often is where there's session hijacking. There are existing sessions on a workstation, maybe a domain admin, maybe to a critical asset, and they enumerate those sessions and just hijack the existing dormant session. So having a session timeout to terminate a session is really, really useful for sort of continuously managing your risk posture internally. Last two, I guess, SMB. You can disable it. A lot of times there are legacy stuff, right, that needs and requires some overhead to sort of make it work. But I highly recommend disabling it, or at minimum using 3.0. So, you don't have those wormable sort of threats in your environment. But I've seen Fortune 100 companies just outright disable it and report no business impact. So it can be done, I promise you. The last one, network management isolation. This is really a plan of action, not necessarily a policy. But, making sure you have a way to access your assets, even if you have an adversary in your environment locking you out of things. A break glass account, direct access to a firewall console, etc. So really quickly, let's go over some final thoughts. Plan, practice, perform. You cannot perform efficiently and effectively if you don't practice ahead of time. There are lots of tabletops available from the government to sort of third-party and first-party ransomware compromises. Highly recommend you run them through. And also trust but verify. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you have a security control and you implement it, don't assume it works. If you have a security control and you want to block an IP at a network edge, test that block is actually in place. We've seen it where, we're trying to contain an adversary, we're working with the customer, and they go to put a control, they think they've done it, and the adversary maintains access because, they weren't as comfortable with their technology as they should have been. So trust, verify, test, and validate. Critical for maintaining your risk. Controlling your risk is also responding to an incident. Last two things, we have a ransomware report. Highly recommend you look into it. Our threat research team puts it together. It goes through trends across the industry as well as our specific recommendations for what we see. And then a quick, specific plug to my team as well. We have a lot of intel out there. We have a podcast, we have reports, blogs. Definitely give it a listen, look into it. We produce a lot of good stuff. Thanks. I think that wraps it up. Jess, do we have time for some questions or anything that's come in so far?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got lots of questions coming in. We're going to get to as many as we can. We're a little short on time here, but Colin, thank you so much for that presentation. That was awesome. So many interesting takeaways. And I appreciate that reminder at the end, the trust but verify.
Trust but verify.
Can't say that enough. All right. Well, let's get into some questions here. All right. I'm going to start with this one. Colin, in your experience, are there any specific tool configurations or, and I like this, misconfigurations that you've come across that, if changed, would dramatically improve an organization's security? What do you got for us, Colin?
That is a really, really good question. I think there's actually two that I can think of off the top of my head. First, configuring your EDR to detect or to prevent and not just detect. If you're deploying an S1 agent across your environment, it can be in a tuning phase where it's just detect, but you need to go back and switch it to prevent. Otherwise, if malware executes on a host, there's not going to prevent it from executing, right? You're going to get the alert, but by that point, it's too late. Highly recommend you go in and make sure that's actually applied across your organization. And I think the second, email security. I talk about phishing a lot, and I'm hitting myself now that I didn't mention this earlier, but email security, if you have a security solution, ensuring that it's not just detecting phishing, but blocking phishing. A lot of the times organizations will be like, oh, we don't want to block it. What if it's a legitimate email? It's going to impact business. Block it. The risk to your organization is so much more than a risk to your business process for a single phishing email. If it's not phishing, they'll reply back and be like, hey, did you get the email, right? It's as simple as that. But like malware is getting dropped all the time on hosts. Users are clicking links. Compromises are happening just because you have a simple control that says detect and not block a phishing email. Highly recommend you enable that.
I love that. If in doubt, just do it. Just block it.
Just do it. It's as simple as that.
Okay, I'm going to sneak in this last question because I think it's going to be a relatively short answer, although I'm sure all of these we could talk about for hours. So we have an audience member out here who says I have a bit of a smaller team. So I have a small security team. Could you suggest one area to focus on where we could improve our effectiveness? What would that one area be, do you think, Colin?
It's going to be hard. I don't know if I can give one, maybe two, but I think sort of hit on it earlier about the visibility portion. Okay. Having your team consistently ask themselves when they're triaging or responding to something, say, do I have the information I need to effectively answer the question of this alert? Having them document that, and then basically having, a monthly, weekly, bi-weekly sort of thing where you aggregate that all together and say, hey, like, I couldn't see this host. Why? Answer those questions, find those visibility gaps in your environment. And it also makes your team proactively sort of think methodically over what other information they need. So then when responding to an engagement, maybe a log source starts going down, they can intuitively think, oh, I can find this information another way. With that also, practice training exercise. I said it at the end there, like you got to practice. If you have a small team, you can still perform phenomenally as long as you're practicing and consistently like exercising those skills so that in the time of need, you know exactly what to do, how to do it to accomplish what you want to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. All the people in the world aren't going to save you if nobody knows what they're doing. So big or small, any team out there should be running those.
Exactly. I'd rather have a team of A-listers than, a huge team of people who don't know what they're doing.
That's right. That's right. Colin, I wish we could keep going. There's lots more questions in the queue here. We're going to get those over to your team to answer over live chat or email in follow-up. So we will make sure that everyone out there does get some answers back to their questions. Colin, before you leave us, though, if somebody out there is really excited, they want to jump in. I know we've got the QR code up on the screen. What's the best way to get started with ReliaQuest?
Yeah, I definitely recommend, you can go to the ReliaQuest.com. You can send us an email there at info@ReliaQuest. We're more than happy to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Just search me up on ReliaQuest and I'll happy to answer any additional questions. So we're always available to talk to you about security.
Well, I certainly look forward to our next conversation. I hope we get to have you back on soon, Colin. This has been so much fun. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What a great chat. Such a great way to, and I hate to say this, but to wrap up our EcoCast today because we are already at the end of our time together. But holy cow, it has just been jam-packed with information, and that last session, absolutely no exception. What a wonderful grand finale. Colin, thank you again so much for that. And I do want to remind all of you that there's that poll up on the screen here. And what we're wondering is, what additional information you would like to get about the ReliaQuest solution? What else would help you dig in a little bit further, explore some of this information a little bit more? There's lots that we covered, and there's obviously lots more to get into. So if you would like to get a little more information, click on that poll right now. Let Colin and his team know how they can follow up with you, how they can reach out to you. I will also suggest that you go over to the handouts tab. Make sure you get the ReliaQuest handout. It's actually a cyber threat report. It's a quarterly cyber threat report, so it's really timely and current. It's on ransomware and data leak extortion. Such an interesting read. So please do download that. Hold on to that. Save that for later because you are going to want to dig into that a little bit after we wrap here. All right. Well, while you're clicking on the handout, getting in those last questions, clicking on the poll, all those good things, I am going to give away our very last $300 Amazon gift card. And a quick reminder that you do need to be here live and present with us at the EcoCast in order to win. And I will also read our entire winners list out. So hang tight for that. All right. Our last winner here with us today is Joshua Franklin of North Carolina. Joshua Franklin of North Carolina. Congratulations. And to all our winners, that's Brian Dominic of Illinois, Noel Botelier, I'm trying my best, Noel, of Texas, and Joshua Franklin of North Carolina. You have all won a $300 Amazon gift card. We will follow up with you after we wrap. Now, don't forget about that best question gift card that's coming at you. You are entered to win every time you ask one of those questions. We review all of them when we close out the webinars. And so even if you don't get your question asked live in a session, you are still entered to win. All right, my friends. Well, with that, I do want to remind all of you that if you're having a great time on the EcoCast, the MegaCast, the Summit, any of our events, and you're thinking that this would be a good opportunity for you and your organization to do a little bit of storytelling of your own, we would love to make that happen. So please reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we will get that conversation started. And on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank our incredible speakers and sponsors today, Nisuni, Palo Alto Networks, and ReliaQuest for making this EcoCast possible. A big thank you, as always, to all of you out there in the audience with us today. We know how valuable your time is. We know how fast all of these threats are moving and how important it is to stay up to date. And sometimes we're so focused, we talked at the start about focusing on where the disc is now, where I'm using Ultimate Frisbee references if you missed that. So the Frisbee disc, if you're looking at where the ball or the Frisbee is, instead of looking at where the threats are, you can miss things. So these are opportunities for us to come together and take a look at the field of play as a whole, take a look at our strategies on the field of play, and not just focus on where our specific opponent is or a specific disc or threat is. So I appreciate all of you spending some time digging into that conversation with us today. I hope you've gotten some interesting ideas and tips out of it, maybe feeling a little more informed and ready to tackle some of these changes that you might want to make at your organization. Now, before you take off for the day, I do want to remind you all about another exciting opportunity to learn a little bit more together. And that is actually tomorrow, Wednesday, September 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern, starting out a little bit early. That says PM. It means AM. If you're looking at the slide and thinking 11 PM, that's not accurate. It's AM. We are not starting at midnight, I promise you. 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific tomorrow. That's Wednesday, September 13th. We're going to talk about enhancing your public, private, and hybrid cloud security postures. This is a great follow-up if you are in any state of the cloud or you're thinking about being in any state of the cloud. This is going to be a great discussion for you. So come join us at the summit tomorrow. Again, Wednesday, September 13th, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Well, until then, I hope you all have an absolutely beautiful end to your day.